Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and I just got back from the new film, The Imitation Game. There's been so many big, important Oscar movies about some element of World War II and some figure that you had never heard of before who is apparently incredibly important to World War II. It's a genre unto itself, and it's kind of hard to take another one of them very seriously, especially because the genre doesn't seem to be evolving at all. It seems to be stuck in this idea of educating the masses about this person. The King's Speech is a perfect example. And The Imitation Game falls in line with that genre. But Alan Turing isn't one of those people. He is a lot more important. He wasn't very well known for a while because it was classified. It wasn't revealed to the public. So he actually is someone who more of the masses should probably know about because of his importance to computers and all the lives he saved. Winston Churchill actually said he did more for World War II than any individual did. He was incredibly, incredibly important. And since, especially this film, really cares about the masses knowing about him and raising awareness for this figure, what is more important? Is the movie more important, or the idea of knowing about Alan Turing? Having a film be more about the importance of this message and the educational value of it than the actual story itself. Alan Turing, who was brought on by the English government to crack a code machine named Enigma that the Nazis were using to send all messages to each other, and the Allies couldn't crack it, and they turned to Alan Turing, played by Benedict Cumberbatch. He, with a group of mathematicians and puzzle solvers, and even a chess champion played by Matthew Good, are recruited to try to help solve this puzzle. Alan Turing decides to build a giant machine he needs money for. He actually contacts Winston Churchill and gets the funding he needs to build this giant machine, which was actually first used as a Polish machine. A lot of people say they haven't acknowledged that, but it was actually first made in Poland, and that he incorporated it to do what it did in this film, and to be able to crack the Enigma machine every day, because you had to have specific settings on the Enigma machine that were changed every day to decipher each code. So it was a very complex machine, and they needed an even more complex machine to solve it, which would help them win the war. And over the course of years and years, they figure out how to do it. That also comes at a cost, as they have to try and figure out what exact operations to use it on so the Nazis don't realize that they have cracked Enigma. And at the same time, Alan Turing is trying to hide his homosexuality. He actually becomes engaged to Keira Knightley's character, who he incorporates to work for them and help deciphering these codes. It cuts between to when Alan Turing was arrested for indecency, Alan Turing talking about what he did even though it was classified and no one could find anything about it, and his eventual chemical castration. Cutting between those two things, showing all the good he did and what was eventually done to him. The Imitation Game definitely has an importance problem in that it really takes on and likes to be overly conscious and overly emphasize big important moments it's having, and having too many eureka moments, because it is kind of raising the awareness of this person who I had not really heard of, and I'm assuming that they are assuming, and rightfully so by the way they made it, that this film would help more people know about him. I've seen films before where even if it's a message I agree with and have been turned on to because of a movie, that doesn't make it a better movie. And I think this movie has bigger problems because of that. It's not really a character study. I mean, it kind of thinks it is, but it's trying to do too many things at once. Really, the performance Benedict Cumberbatch gives, which is one of his best performances, I think it's a really good performance. It's probably the best thing about this movie. If you had a director who cared more about the character than spreading the message and being educational, than the self-importance of telling everyone about Alan Turing and getting more and more of the world to know who he is and how important this man was, then this movie would be a better movie, because it cares too much about that. That shouldn't be your main focus. Your main focus should be story and character, and this film just doesn't care about that. It does, but it doesn't really want to focus on the man, the real complexities of being this man and being charged indecent because he was gay. Kind of just wants to talk about how he did all these glorious things and kind of acknowledge them but not really go into it. It's really kind of a stupid movie about a smart man. It's just not really trying to get into the complexities of this guy, and because of that it's so much weaker. Benedict Cumberbatch has nuance in his performance, almost how he plays Sherlock, but I'd say not as obviously not as charismatic, because this guy was not charismatic. He does pull on some charm with it, but he almost plays it in kind of a charismatic neurotic, autistic way that really works for it. And this says a lot about him as an actor, that he can get this performance to be as good as it is. It's truly an Oscar movie in that the best thing about it is acting. Benedict Cumberbatch could really sink his teeth into this role, and I really wish there was a director who would give us more of those moments with him and more of an unconventional approach. And this whole kind of believe in yourself because you'll do good by the world even if they don't recognize the thing is something that Hollywood's always trying to shove down my throat. I hate more and more as it goes on because it's so fucking phony. Listen, I know you're weird, but it's good. Now let's think of the good. Let's not think of the bad stuff, how you're socially ostracized and you never really find happiness, somebody chemically castrated you. Just don't think about that. Think about the World War II thing. That was great. It's a shitty message about a movie, and that's a shitty thing about society, that we're kind of like acknowledging this great guy with this movie and trying to tell the story of this guy. You get a great performance about him, but you're kind of not showing the tragedy of what happened to him and what society did to him, and maybe have a comment on post-World War II society, how it was really conservative and how things really actually kind of sucked when everybody came back from World War II, and the whole Red Scare thing and how people were attacking all sorts of different groups, and that was pretty horrible. They acknowledge he was chemically castrated. They have scenes with that, but they don't really get into it. They don't show the suicide spoilers, I guess. They kind of just have it in a text at the end, which I think this film lives a little too much for the text at the end. Oh, the Turing machine. People call them the Turing machines, and they eventually become computers. This is super important. Okay, I didn't doubt it was. It lived a little too much to have that montage. It was like, see, now even if you hated this, you feel stupid. When people add text at the end that have all this important information that I'll be thinking about for 20 to 30 minutes after I've left the movie, I kind of think about how come you couldn't have a scene that made me think for 20 to 30 minutes after the movie. You had to have text that did that. That's not very cinematic at all. That's the defeating point to this whole thing. The whole thing with this film is it kind of acts like it's a character study, but also kind of a spy movie. And the character study element to it, you could do the story of Alan Turing as a great character study. Really, it should happen. It hasn't, especially in this movie. This film wants to do the spy thing, but it's mainly showing them trying to solve Enigma, and then it keeps cutting to a couple different plots. One was when he got caught for indecency, and that whole plot line didn't work as well because you have this investigator who his house got broken into, and this investigator's like, there's more to this than meets the eye, and suddenly he can spend all this time on this investigation, which seems kind of a little worthless. I guess cops in England then had nothing to do except bust gay dudes. That character is kind of just a throwaway character that doesn't need to be in there. That plot was okay because you have this nice interrogation scene with Benedict Cumberbatch and this investigator that somewhat narration throughout the film and they keep cutting back to. I kind of thought that worked well, showing how he did all this good, but then he was prosecuted for his homosexuality. But then you have this other plot line with his boarding school, which I really wish they had cut out because it was hurting the narrative of the film. I actually kind of liked them trying to solve Enigma. I could get into those. It wasn't until later in the film because they kept cutting between these three different plot lines, and it was like it would take me out of the Enigma thing and it would take me out of the movie. And the one that did it the most was the boarding school stuff and how he fell in love with his classmate and his name was Christopher. That was the name of the machine, which was like, okay. I can't find anywhere that that is true. I think that's just a really dumb plot convenience and it smells of it. Why have that? It doesn't really entirely work except to have the reveal that he's named the computer after this kid and that's the guy who got him into solving puzzles. That could have been done at the beginning. This could have been done in more of a linear fashion and I probably would have liked it a lot more. But the way they did this, it just really kept taking me out of the film. It didn't invest me more into it. It didn't make me like the Alan Turing character any more than I already did or anything. It just ruined the flow of the narrative. They even had these scenes of him running. And later I found out he actually did do a lot of long distance running. He was known for long distance running. He really enjoyed to do that. No character ever refers to that. No one goes, oh, you and your running, always solving your math problems. They never go into that. They just show him running. And Benedict Cumberbatch looks weird when he runs. So it was even more bizarre. If you knew more about Alan Turing, you go, oh, I get why that's in there, but it's never explained, especially in a movie that likes to explain a lot of things overly to you. It's kind of odd to just have this sequence where he's running for like no reason. They did too many things like that that were just kind of wasted moments that were suggesting they were doing somewhat of a character study, but were not really building to anything and they were not nuanced. When they had the parts where they're trying to solve Enigma, I actually thought this is a better directed, big, self-important Oscar film. And I actually kind of like those parts. And I was surprised that I kind of liked a picture like that. But as soon as it tried to do that and the character study thing, I wish it had just done one or the other. That was more compelling. And this whole thing in the boarding school really should not have been in there and didn't fit. It was an awkward way to tell the story. The problem with this film, and the problem with a lot of films that are talking about the past and talking about a historical figure, and they want people to know certain things about the figure, is they kind of sacrifice narrative for the information. And this film didn't really exactly understand which information it wanted people to know. This was just somebody including something that didn't work, that didn't make a lot of sense. You're not really doing a character study. Your main thing of this film is trying to tell us about Alan Turing, and certainly that's commendable. It just wanted us to know about him. Films about World War II have been made under that presumption since there have been films made about World War II. During World War II, the studios would actually make films about every little segment of the military because they thought people would be interested in it, because they knew the interest was there. And I kind of feel like the reason they eventually came to Alan Turing, because they thought, oh, well, this is a perfect little Oscar bait movie, we can have this self-importance about it, he is a major character and everything like that. And unfortunately, this reeks of that. The problem with the World War II genre is it's never been great at reinventing itself. It's never really understood where to go post Inglourious Bastards. This is a badly told and badly directed example, really. It kind of shows they don't know where to go, because this is someone who really deserved a really good movie and is a complex person, and it was a complex story, and the math, I'm sure, was pretty complex. This film doesn't capture that. It gives us a bullshit message, and it's made for dumb adults to feel smart when they go to the movies and not be challenged. It is commendable that people are talking about him, and I think that's great. But you have to hold the movie to itself. You can't think of an educational message and think that's better than the storytelling. It's like a good subject matter. It's just a very poor execution. And the funny thing is, it's about somebody who had great execution and had a different kind of execution to math and to life. How he solved that and helped World War II and did this amazing thing because of it. And of course, he gets honored in a very traditional and ordinary and boring way. Just like how traditional and boring and ordinary life kind of ended up destroying him, we have come and done that with his legacy by making a truly kind of forgettable, boring Oscar picture that's a little too interested in its importance in telling the story and the educational value of that. So if you have seen The Imitation Game and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.